Hello everyone, welcome back to my show, NainaMD, Beverly Hills, Fusion of Science and Beauty. I've got an amazing topic again. It's something that you guys have not heard about. I have always tried to educate you guys on nutrigenomics, and that's how nutrients can change the way you affect your genes. There's another topic, it's called nutrigenetics. And I want to introduce a guest who's going to explain you the difference between nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics. These seem really complicated. This is cutting edge. Just like the computer was complicated many years ago, and now it's like everybody has like an iPhone and we know how to do all of this. Nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics is the same way, but this is in terms of your health. This is going to help empower your health. So my next guest is Ron Martin. He's the CEO and founder of Nutrigenetics Unlimited, Inc. And I welcome to my show because it's just amazing to have you. I was so excited. I've been trying to get you on my show for, I think, several weeks. And I'm just so glad you were able to drive up. I know you drove about 2 hours to just come and see me, but I really think you have a lot to say to the audience. And tell us what nutrigenetics is. Okay.
First of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about this topic because it's really, like you said, is cutting edge.
Yeah.
It's about how our genes interact with our nutrition, basically.
Yeah.
When we started off, I was mainly focusing on nutrition, but then I realized that it's really difficult to make a dividing line where nutrition ends and other things start. So we decided to expand our online database on our website.
Which you had it for almost like 10 years, and no one's heard about this as much. 10 years you guys have had it. You have a master's in food and health sciences that brought you to to get this passion.
Sure.
10 years.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I worked in the health industry, dietary supplements, for most of my career. And I became interested there in the interplay between genetics and nutrition because some people respond really well to dietary supplements and other people don't. And I was wondering, what is the reason for that? Is it a bad design in their study or what? So about 13 years ago, I attended the first international conference on nutrigenomics. It was held in the Netherlands.
Yes.
And then again on the following year, I went to the second conference, also in the Netherlands. And by that time, I was hooked and I was convinced that genetics could explain a lot of the reasons why some people respond one way and other people a different way.
Yeah. It's just like if you have, for example, and we're just going to give you guys an example. We don't expect you to understand all the details, but just get the idea. Let's say you've got a liver detoxification pathway, right? And let's say you've got a gene. Let's just say you've got a gene called YB1, okay? It actually helps hydroxylate estrogens, okay? So let's say we know that certain nutrients can affect that enzyme. And if you can affect that enzyme for the better, then you know you're going to be able to hydroxylate and metabolize your estrogens better. So suddenly you genetically impacted. And that's how nutrition can impact, right? The genetics.
Yes, a lot of people have been studying mechanisms for how nutrition affects our metabolism. And they explain it by saying it affects our genes because our genes control almost all the proteins in our body.
Right.
But now that we moved into the more sophisticated level, we can see that there's also the fact that some people have different gene variants in their bodies, and so they respond differently.
And these are called SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. They're called SNPs, okay?
That's right. So that can explain why some people might actually do well on a certain drug or a certain hormone. Other people may need less of that drug or hormone because
they can't. That gene doesn't, it
don't
metabolizes either.
That's
doesn't
right.
metabolize quite as readily or metabolizes too quickly, depending. Right.
That's right. If it's too quickly, they need more, so to be effective. Right. Now, sometimes it doesn't matter as long as you're in a ballpark, but sometimes it does matter, especially if there is just a narrow window that you have to be in to prevent, let's say, some kind of a medical calamity.
Yeah.
So,
is there something there? And the other thing also recognizes, so that it gets a little bit confusing because when I was learning this stuff years and years and years ago, I think I started even before I went to medical school. But one of the things about genes and what you were getting at, sometimes you need to, what we call upregulate a gene, which means you need to make it work more to have a good effect, but sometimes you need to downregulate it to actually have a good effect. So that gets into interplaying. And so, you know, upregulation, downregulation of which genes. Also, some genes you require, like you said, you know, you need to make it work. It needs to go faster, or if it goes slower, then that's not good. So there's a little bit of all of those detail, but the most important thing is how nutrients can affect, you know, our genetics. So what is this database? Tell me about. Okay, what's the very first step you did?
Sure.
Like,
Well,
what have you been collecting in 10 years?
As I mentioned to you, I have been working in product development and research and development for the dietary supplement industry. So I had been looking at the National Library of Medicine's database for a long time, many years. And the web address is pubmed.gov.
Right.
And they have all kinds of medical journal articles there that you can look through, which I was doing. And when I went to that conference on nutrigenomics, I started to look in that database for stuff on nutrition and genetics.
Right.
And I found it very difficult to find because I've discovered that it's because the terminology was not consistent. Some authors would use one abbreviation, some authors would use a different abbreviation, or all kinds of variations, not only for the genes,
Right.
but especially for the gene variants.
Right.
Because
No,
that,
I know that.
oh,
That,
then
yeah.
that is just,
That's
it's
huge,
a
yeah.
lot of difference. So I made it my mission to create a database that would make it so much easier to find which genes and which gene variants are being involved with any particular topic, you know, whether it be a health condition or even things like exercise or sports. And we have expanded it to include as much as we can find. And if there's anything we've missed, if anyone asks me, we'll enhance our database to cover that.
What's so? In other words, so give me an example. So give me an example of what you have done when you've what a person who, let's say I wanted to know about, let's say I want to know about how for example, heart health.
Oh,
Okay.
sure.
So let's say I want to know heart health, and
Well-
and what foods would affect certain genes. So I would need to. So we would
Yes.
need to know what genes are involved with heart health.
Right.
Correct. Okay, so give me an example of
Well,
how we would look that up.
The way that I started working with it was to do a search on PubMed.gov
Right.
for articles that have anything pertaining to genetics and nutrition,
Got it.
or heart health, for
Right.
instance. And then I would systematically look through those articles for anything that has a mention of a specific genes or specific gene variants. And then I would make sure that we search thoroughly the rest of the literature for those things and then add them to our database so that we'd have good coverage. And what makes our database really powerful is because we have used a controlled vocabulary, that is standardized terminology, so that you can look at an alphabetical listing of subtopics for any given topic or for any given combination of topics, which is even better.
Fabulous.
And then all the genes are listed separately at the bottom. So you have the first A to Z, apples through zinc.
Okay.
And then you start with a new A to Z at the bottom, which is all the alphabetical gene symbols, the official gene symbols.
So like what? So like let's say 1B1
or ACE
or
for
ACE, right? Right.
angiotensin.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So then.
What about 5-methyl-tetrahydrofolic acid reductase, right?
Oh, that's right.
'Cause
That would be
that's a huge one.
MTHFR.
MTHFR, right?
And then below that, because everything is alphabetical, we use that gene symbol as a prefix. So then you can see the gene variants are grouped together and how many of them are being discussed. And then if you want to look at the specific articles, we make that simple too. So it's really a phenomenal way to go.
Wow, that's tremendous. So let me just discuss something with you and just how things have been ignored in nutrition. And I think nutrition got separated from science really, and my mentor Jeffrey Bland kind of discussed this when I was training with him many, many years ago. And one of the things they said is that nutrition kind of went along with the home economics. They started separating out in kind of like high school and college, right? If you wanted to study nutrition, you just like go into home economics, and that wasn't very exciting. And yet, if you wanted to do science, you would be like into more like science and
chemistry.
And so that's how science and nutrition got separated. And without realizing that nutrition are actually chemicals. I mean, they're natural chemicals, but they're still they affect your genes. They affect. So they are actually nutrigenetics.
Absolutely.
So it's really sad that this happened, because then it left out, then pharma and drugs got synthesized and everybody forgot to do research on nutrients. So when you look at validity, and when I actually go and lecture and I actually have to give validity to everything that I do, I'm in a very controversial field as an
Sure.
MD. And when I give validity, I started looking at biochemistry journals. And I looked at the best biochemistry journals. And no one could then start, when you have good biochemistry journals, how can people argue? For example, I'm going to give you one example. We all know about homocysteine levels.
Okay.
Sometimes elevated homocysteine levels related to heart disease.
Right.
And we know that's because, some of it is because there's a metabolism defect in the 5-methyltetrahydrofolic acid reductase. That's the
MTHFR.
MTHFR gene. So McCulley wrote a whole book called The Homocysteine Revolution. He did his research at Harvard. Did you know that he was kicked out of Harvard? Because nobody believed him, and nobody wanted to believe him, because what was a simple treatment? A proper kind of folic acid, right?
Right.
We have folic acid. So if we don't have the gene, which is the MTHFR, working properly, which you need two variants, right? Meaning you've got what we call two parts of the gene that needs to work properly. So if you have
one
variant, right, one from each parent, right? So if you don't have one, then that means you've got a defect. And what that does is that it can elevate the homocysteine levels, which creates more inflammation, can have an impact on your heart. It can also, methylation defects can have effect on your mood, memory, so many things, okay? So we started giving in nutrition that we give the breakdown product, because we know that folic acid has to be broken down into what we call 5-methyl and 5-formyl tetrahydrofolic acid. So we started giving the breakdown product thinking people couldn't, process that. And that's what McCulley arrived at. These are the conclusions. And he was kicked out of Harvard. He had to go finish his research in VA. Nobody even believed that elevated homocysteine levels could be linked. And still, everyone's trying to downgrade that theory. And no one says, why do you even have to check homocysteine levels? And you can see something so important like that,
yes,
that can breed inflammation, is being ignored. Now, what happened? The pharma company picked up on this. So Deplin is really a breakdown product of folic acid. And the pharmaceutical company actually is patented just a little, basically a nutrient. Basically a nutrient. So we are now starting to see the nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics is so powerful that pharma companies want control of this and are now patenting. And there's a drug called Deplin, and there's another one called there's a new one. I can't pronounce it, but it's out, and it's the same thing. It's the same principle going after this methylation that the body can't methylate properly.
When I went to the first conference...
Is that interesting?
Oh, yes. When I went to and I agree 100%.
Yeah.
When I went to the first conference on nutrigenomics, everything was just beginning to emerge. And so there was such emphasis on research, and most of the physicians had the attitude that we should just wait until the dust settles. Yeah. But now we're entering now the phase of translational research. That is, transforming the laboratory research into practical use, and that's
I've been doing that for 10 years, and I've been attacked for it. And because I guess I was a little ahead of my time.
We need pioneers. If we don't do it, who's going to do it?
There you go. Listen, what is the website's name? Because I think this is so interesting that people should be able to go to. What's your website?
It's nutrigenetics.net. Now that's a term that most people are not familiar with.
So Nutri. So it's nutrigenetics. That's NUTRI. Genetics. So that's easy. GENETICS.
.net.
.net.
Another easier way to remember it, and which will also work if you do a search or type it into your bar, is nutritionandgenetics.net.
There you go, nutritionandgenetics.net. You guys, thank you so much for being on my show. You're going to come back.
Yeah, okay,
you're going to come back. This is the CEO and founder of an amazing company, Nutrigenetics Unlimited Inc. Please go to the website, look up at the research. The evidence is all there, and I will be back next week with another amazing show, good topics. This is NainaMD, Beverly Hills, Fusion of Science and Beauty.